Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Achieving Continuous Delivery on Microsoft Azure. Just to quickly go back over, we are today going to be discussing how we can make the process of automating software delivery less daunting. We're going to be doing so by showing how to use Jenkins Pipelines to deploy to Microsoft Azure. And CloudBees and Architech have teamed together for this to help show you how we can help you together achieve your broader DevOps goals. I just want to let everyone know a few things up front. We are recording this session, and the recording will be made available to you later on. We are also able to take questions during the session. There's a panel where you can enter them. My colleague, Andy Varhola, is on the line just to help kind of read out the questions and see what we can get answered at the end when we have time. If we don't get to anyone's questions, we will work to get to them after the fact because we are going to be ending at the top of the hour. So to introduce our two speakers today, our first speaker will be Ahmed Khalifa from Architech, and he is a solutions architect. And then there will be a demo later on done by Chen Xie from CloudBees, who is also a solutions architect. So please, again, remember to ask those questions as they come in. Don't be afraid. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to Ahmed to get us started.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to have an interesting conversation about the role that CloudBees Jenkins and Microsoft Azure play in our continuous integration, continuous delivery in the context of a large enterprise. The agenda for today will be, we will start by introducing Architect and its partnership with CloudBees. We will also have a quick overview of the enterprise DevOps quadrants. Then we will go into the details, some of the details of CloudBees Jenkins and Microsoft Azure and how to use them for continuous integration and delivery in an enterprise. Then there will be a quick summary. We'll do a demo and we have Q&A. So in Architect, we have been in the business for 12 years. We have more than 120 people, so we are not really a small firm. We have world-class engineering, we have a very strong design and strategy team, and we have a focus on cognitive analytics. We have more than 200 plus projects. Architect has been an agile and lean development shop since inception almost. Most of our engineers come from an earlier background of extreme programming, so the concept of doing agile and lean development is a concept that we have been doing for a long time. Continuous integration and delivery is part of our methodology and core practices, and we have a very strong design thinking team as well. We are partners with multiple strategic software providers like Red Hat and .cms for content management, but probably the most important thing for this presentation is our partnership with CloudBees and with Microsoft. I think we are playing a big role in the Azure and Jenkins platform in Canada, at least for the time being. So CloudBees have this amazing concept of the quadrants of enterprise DevOps. So I'm going to go through a quick review of it, just in case some of you are not familiar with it. It is actually a very, very valuable tool for us to understand and to guide our conversation going forward when we talk about DevOps in an enterprise. So this is DevOps as we know it. This is how we see the DevOps in every probably brochure or document outside, and how we see it is planning, monitoring, operation, code, testing, and continuous and releasing and deploying. The most interesting thing happens is when we take that loop and we flatten it out a little bit, and we apply this to an enterprise, and then what we notice is there will be this line, sort of like the battlefield line is around the release area. Anything happens to the left of that line is our upstream project. Anything happens to the right of that line is a downstream project. If you're a small organization, it is quite seamless, but in a large enterprise situation, or even in a medium-sized enterprise, there is a lot of friction between the two. There is generally different cultures, different type of engineering practices, different way of managing the deliveries of each area. And according to Forrester Research, I think in 2015, only 33% were doing agile on the left, on the upstream. in enterprise space. Only 13% were doing Agile on the right, which is the downstream. And what does that mean is that a lot of people doing Agile in upstream, but they are faced with a non-Agile practice in the delivery in the downstream, and that creates frictions. And of course, frictions just break gears. We don't like that. So now we take that, and not only we have this, the horizontal sort of axes of which we can say, where are we in the Agile process? But we also have a vertical axis, because in an enterprise, you could be doing upstream Agile in a team level, but maybe the work group is not. So if you're a bank, for example, you may have one team doing Agile, but as an insurance group or a retail group or an investment treasury group, you're not doing it. And maybe one group is doing it. I mean, I think if you're familiar with the financial systems, you would know that there will always be the guys who deal with the money. They have a lot of cash and they're allowed to break the rules. And as a group, you know, capital markets, for example, would be the first one to apply a new strategy, but the rest of the enterprise doesn't have it. So not only we have a chasm or a barrier to cross from the upstream to the downstream, we also have other chasms and other barriers to cross from, according to the scale, from the team to the work group to the full enterprise. And again, we go with the numbers. 33%, like we said, is doing team Agile, but only 14% are doing enterprise Agile. 13% is doing team work group continuous delivery. Only 10% are doing the enterprise continuous delivery. So the majority of people is on that left lower corner in that quadrant. And what happens here is that because every team is repeating the same process, we have no shared experience, and we have a lot of wasted and repeated efforts. And we actually incur high cost of tools, although people think they are using a lot of open source and free tools, but in reality, because of the repetition, we get high tools cost. And then we get delayed processes, and there is some training and skills confusion. People are not sure, what are we going to use Git? Are we going to use SVN? Are we going to use Bitbucket? If you are on the right, on the top, once you get into the enterprise continuous integration and delivery, your teams are allowed to innovate faster, which means you are capable of responding to market. That's the goal that we're all here for. Gaining competitive advantage, of course. You can increase productivity, and one of the most important things that is always missed is that we have high employee satisfaction and talent retention. It is known that developers don't leave shops or don't leave jobs because of the workload. They leave when they are frustrated, when the projects are not going through. And finally, we have an important thing to deliver to our organization, which is enhanced controls, so we can have security and governance and quality metrics, etc., etc. So now you can look at this quadrant and you can easily say, my organization is here. And there is no right or wrong answer. Basically, the quadrants describe the universe of DevOps in an enterprise. And all what we are doing is we are just navigating through it, and we're taking a journey. We may start on a team level, and we start in upstream, and we do continuous integration and delivery, and we succeed. We take it to the work group, and then we take it to the enterprise. Sometimes it starts by an enterprise directive, where we just hired a new CEO, a new CIO, who's very visionary, and he says we have to start with this process. And we start from the top corner down to the bottom. So there is really no right or wrong answer. This is just different journeys that we're all taking together in that space. And this is what I really like about the model. So now that we have sort of an idea, I mean, each one of us now has an idea of where I am in that process. Now, what we are going to talk about is how CloudBees and Microsoft Azure together can help me navigate these areas. What are the big things that help me cross from continuous integration to continuous development? What are the things that help me get from the team to the work group to the enterprise level? So the first thing I would like to say is that Azure and CloudBees is a first-class object. I wouldn't say first-class citizen because that's probably not the right thing to say, but it is a first-class object. So in the operations center, next to your masters, next to your shared clouds, you can define an Azure shared cloud. And in that Azure shared cloud, you will define your subscription ID, as we'll see in the next screen. Also, inside your master clients, you have all the Azure support. You have an Azure storage plugin, which we will talk about shortly. You have the Azure Slave plugin, which we will see in a little bit more detail further down. And you also have a CLI plugin, which allows you to use the command line interface to build your Azure machines inside your pipelines and inside your builds. And we also have a batch parallel test execution. For those of you familiar with batch parallel processes in Azure, it is sort of an equivalent of running an HDFS type, Hadoop type query on multiple servers in an embarrassingly parallel problem, with the benefit of not having to bring up HD Insight or Hadoop up and consume the data. You can run it against the data at rest, where the data exists. So I'm going to take now a 10,000-foot view of how the whole process looks like. You think of it this way: if you stopped in Europe for a transit somehow, and you have a 1-hour visit on a tour bus, and the tour bus will come and take you and show you some of the most interesting parts of the city, and for each one of these interesting parts, there are 10 times more interesting parts. So this is just this is exactly what we are doing. We're taking a tour of the possibilities of CloudBees and Azure. We'll show you some interesting situations, and there will be a lot more for us to discover together in the future. So what we start with is we say we have a development team master, Jenkins, we have a QA master, and we have a prod master. And what happens is each one of these masters will define a shared cloud. Each one of these shared clouds will provide build agents, and these build agents come from Azure. So if you are in dev, you may want to do your builds, and you can see maybe you want to have smaller build engines on the development, maybe larger build engines in the QA servers because you are running performance tests, probably equivalent to the same size of the build agents on the prod. But maybe in the prod you'll have more build agents because you're doing multiple projects, etc., etc. And then these red dots, for those of us who come from infrastructure background, you know what that is right away. That's your firewall. And why do we have firewalls? Well, we have firewalls for security. And by nature, the QA team security environment is different from the dev security environment, is different from the prod build security environment. Another firewall comes up, and what happens is now we have our production servers. So far on the left, we're talking about the build environment. On the right now, we are talking about the production servers. This is what we are building. So what happens is our Jenkins build, our agents, will build these databases, app servers, maybe HD Insights, Hadoop instances running on the production servers. And then another firewall will come up, and that will be our DMZ. And in the DMZ zone, we will build our web servers, again built by Azure. And then finally, we get our enterprise final firewall, and our clients sit on the public internet. So as you can see here from left to right, from dev to all the way to go back to client, these are the different zones, and these are the different requirements. And this is why we have different requirements for each one of these environments. And this is how Microsoft Azure and CloudBees help us operate and cross the hops of all these environments. It allows us to work in a development environment where the developers need a little bit of flexibility. They don't want to deal with tightened down securities. They want to be able to go and experiment with their own new libraries, and they want maybe to connect to open repositories, not just enterprise repositories. They want to try something new and they want a little bit of freedom doing that, but also they are not allowed to see certain production information that does not sit on their servers. And when you get into the QA environment, it has higher level of security because it contains some production environment or some production-like environment for us to do our testing. And this is when you start to test the environment in a secured lockdown setup. And then finally, our build agents will run in the same security zone as our production servers. I mean, if there is anything that is more secured than my production server, it will be the server that will build my production server. So the security of these two is on the same level. And the flexibility that Microsoft Azure and Jenkins CloudBees together give us is the ability to cross these zones seamlessly almost and minimizing the interaction. So how we do that? So let's take a look again at our build environment. Let's focus on our build environment. In a sample, like we talked about, just we're taking a bus tour in one sample, and we're looking at a Java app, for example. The management will enter in Azure board their requirements, and here we have our stories, we have our backlogs. The development will take the stories and the backlogs, and they will start creating in Git, in the enterprise, code that responds to these stories and that backlog. That code will then get built by something like Maven. Maven would need to grab the repositories. In an enterprise, generally, you'll get it from Artifactory, from an approved enterprise repository. And once we take these builds, we're going to run some unit testing on them. Well, the test worked well, so what are we going to do? Now, all that build, all that source will turn into binaries, and these binaries that source code first will be tested by SonarQube, maybe to check for quality, look for problems in the code so that we can anticipate early. And then when everything looks okay, the development says, okay, I think my binary is ready for testing. So we take that development binary, we deposit it, we store it again in Artifactory. So now Artifactory hosts not just libraries, but also our own binaries. And we take that binary and we pass it along to our our QA team. The QA team doesn't have to cross that firewall for Git. They don't have to cross the firewall for the JUnit or SonarQube or any of these tools. All what they need is just the binary and maybe some configuration files. The QA team will take that and they will say, okay, let me, tape some Docker around that, or maybe run big tests, run New Relic, get some performance numbers, have some monitoring around it, do maybe some user acceptance tests. And then at one point, when they are fully satisfied with their solution, somebody, generally speaking, it will be a person that says, okay, the QA says this is ready for release. And when they do that, that same binary will come out to Artifactory, through Artifactory to the team that is waiting in production. Well, we have seen the use of Artifactory or binary repositories, but what if you want to pass configuration files? And by configuration files, of course, we know the practice. We don't pass passwords, we don't pass IDs, we don't pass even IPs of servers, but rather we pass the template. So there will be a template of configuration passing from development to QA to prod, and each environment is responsible to put in that template the proper value. And these values are guarded very heavily because some of them is maybe SSH gen keys, maybe user IDs and passwords of production servers. So that will be guarded really, really heavily. So we need sometimes to share some artifacts, and one of the best ways to share artifacts that comes from Microsoft Azure is Azure Storage. And Azure Storage has, again, a first-class object representation inside CloudBees Jenkins. So you can create a Microsoft Azure Storage account configuration, and you can give it a name, and you can pass it, as you can see here, the storage name, you can pass it the storage account key and blobs endpoint URL, and that will be available for all your builds. So you can take your build binaries, you can take your properties files that you need to fill, your templates, and you can pass it along. And you can use Microsoft Azure Blob Storage to exchange data in conjunction or completely instead of Artifactory. And then our production master will get that information, and he knows everything is tested and everything is ready to go. And what he can do is he says, okay, I am going to have some Docker, and maybe if they're not using Docker, maybe they're using Puppet or Chef or something. And one of the benefits of having Microsoft Azure is we have a CLI to build our environments, so it lends itself naturally into the automation, or what we call infrastructure as code. So we can have code ready to build our infrastructure. One of the important aspects of trust and confidence between production and QA and dev has always been immutability. My ability to rebuild the environment from scratch at any moment, my ability to do a process repeat it, and with confidence and trust of the result always. So infrastructure as code, configuration as code are very important practices, and Microsoft Azure lends itself natural to that through CLI, and of course Jenkins CloudBees is probably one of the best resources we have to have that infrastructure and configuration as code. Finally, we do a quick smoke test, and now we have a final product ready for our clients to use. So if I'm going to go quickly over the reasons, like after this sample, after we have seen just this quick tour of what are the possibilities we have, we can say these are the major benefits of having CloudBees and Microsoft together in doing CI/CD. I can have great benefits in rolling out my planning. I can have fall back or fall forward. I can only imagine 10 years ago if somebody said you have the option of keeping all your current production environment for the next 6 months while you are rolling up the new environment for a minimum amount of cost. That would have been a huge cost before. But now they say, okay, just in Azure, just stop your current production environment, start your new environment, and if there is any problem, you can always fall back. That's a great benefit. Or if you're doing any sort of green-blue deployment, that is also a great benefit of being able to roll out my new migrations, my new versions. As we talked about, CLI, and it is completely natural to use in infrastructure as code. It's integration with Puppet, with Chef, and with Jenkins itself as well. Environment isolation, the fact that we have separate network domains inside, that we can create multiple sub-networks and multiple virtual networks inside Azure, gives the QA team and the production team the peace of mind, the ability to feel confident and relaxed in doing a continuous deployment, continuous integration process without breaking the security barriers. Being able to share binaries and configurations and templates, and having the proper auditing for it, the proper tracing. You can have a strong lineage of every file that is in your blob storage or in your repository. And being able to have separate masters, because I want to have separate masters with separate authentication and authorization definitions. Maybe the QA team doesn't want to share some of its IDs. It's not maybe, actually, that's always the case. The QA team does not want to share with the development, and the production team should not share with anyone else. So the isolation is very important. We have supply chain pipeline support. We have CloudBees complex pipeline flows. We have separate agent groups. We can create multiple separate agent groups. Each group is shared by a different master and with different authorization model. And that allows us to have separate pipelines, but they are still integrated, although they are not the same pipeline. And finally, we have network storage, like we talked about, which gives us the ability to share repositories and binaries. So let's talk now. So now that we talked about crossing the horizontal, how do we cross from left to right? We give a little bit of confidence. Now, how do we do scale? So here we are in a normal environment. These are build agents for dev, QA, and prod. And Things happen in the real world in an enterprise. For example, if for any of you who is around during the summer in the financial industry, we had this interesting event called Brexit. And 2 weeks before Brexit, 2 weeks after Brexit, we had a freeze deployment in most financial institutions. We are not going to introduce any more risks. Thank you, Great Britain, for introducing enough risk for us. We are not going to add to that by putting new software. And that actually happened. Sometimes you will have a merger and acquisition. Once you have a merger and acquisition, probably the being merged company will freeze any deployment of any new software until the merger and acquisition continues. And sometimes in certain domains, the acquisition partner, the acquirer, will not also deploy anything. So what happens when you do that? Well, it's great. Let's save money. Let's stop all these build agents, and suddenly we're saving a lot of cash on having machines laying around doing nothing. It gets interesting because at the end of that period, at the end of that window, well, guess what? Instead of having 3 or 4 or 5 apps going into production this week, we are going to have 40 of them going production this week because they have all been waiting in the pipeline. So that's no problem. I am going to load up. I'm not going to start in my normal capacity. I'm going to start in a much higher capacity to respond to that build request. I could have done the same in QA as well. And then once we deal with that high surge in demand for deployment, now we go back into our normal self again. We go back into our normal bowl load, and we can easily say, okay, just get rid of the stuff you don't need, and we go back to our normal load. And you can see here in our definition of when you define a Microsoft Azure Cloud, you go with the subscription ID. You can have multiple subscription ID. Of course, it is highly encouraged that every group, it depends on the organization, some groups will have different subscription IDs, and maybe you'll have even different subscription IDs per project. It's up to how do you want to slice and dice your accounting. But you have a subscription ID and you have the certificate there, and you will say for that subscription ID, this is the maximum of the virtual machine limit. And then you go and say, okay, in this cloud, and you can create multiple clouds. These are the labels that this cloud will respond to. So every time you use that label in one of your nodes or in one of your builds, then the build will say, okay, I have an Azure Eager label. So how many free agents are available for me in the Azure Eager? If there is any free, I'll go use one. If there is no free, I will actually build one from scratch in Azure and use it dynamically. You will specify the region, you specify the type of machine. The fact that we can specify the type of machine through CloudBees and Microsoft Azure is of great flexibility, because in an enterprise, our build machines are very different. We have build machines that are doing data science practices. We have build machines that are doing maybe streaming like Spark or Kafka running on Hadoop. We may have build machines doing Java. We have build machines doing deployments. We can have different types of machines doing, for example, automated testing for QA. So it is very important that we have the right type of machine for the right type of job, and we have that need in an organization that go through analytics or mobile or, or normal Java apps. Then you specify the retention time, and it's very important that you say, you don't want to discard the machine right away after you finished, otherwise you create a lot of thrashing. You want to give your system a chance to stabilize a little bit. So you would say, keep the machine around for 60 minutes just in case somebody else needs it. And here you can say, I want to shut it down. Don't delete it only when you're done. Just shut it down so I can bring it up, which means you incur some little cost, you know, a few cents a day. Maybe you want to delete it. It doesn't matter. You can reproduce it again. This is one of the nice things about it. These machines, not only you say, I want a basic machine or I want like certain GPU machine, you can also specify the image. So you can create a machine, you can create a VM that has all your standard tools, that has Node, that has Git, that has Maven, that has Docker Compose and Docker Engine installed if you're doing Docker. You can have a built virtual machine turn it into an image in Azure. So that machine becomes an image, which is very simple to do, and then use that image family. So you don't have to install anything. The minute that machine runs, it's got all your stack ready. And all what you have to do is, if that stack changes, and it doesn't change often, but if that stack changes, you just update that stack, you create another image, and you update the cloud configuration, and there you go. From now on, all your builds are running on your new image. There is also an option of doing that through an init script. One caveat though, I think today is October 26th of 2016. As of today, this supports only classical Azure. It does not support the new resource manager, but I'm assuming this will be coming quickly through the pipes. Here you go through just a username and password of the machine you're using. We discussed earlier the virtual network name. Every cloud can have a different network domain and a subnet name just for isolation, because each one of these networks will have its own firewalls rules and its own security rules. And you can say the number of executors. This was an A0 machine I was using in my personal account, so I have only one executor on it for now. So, and then as we said before, you describe the maximum virtual machine limit, and you hit OK, let me go. And this is just a screenshot of what I was seeing on my machine. And you can see once I started a new build, and that build needed an Azure Eager label and machine, and there was none around. He said, OK, let me try to find an Azure. There is none. OK, let's go to Azure Launcher and say I want to launch it. Once he launched the Azure image, then he copied the slave.jar from CloudBees to it. And then once he launched it, once he copied the slave.jar, then here on the Java command, as you can see here in the green rectangle, and then finally, bam, we have now two computers connected, two agents ready to run inside our CloudBees environment. Excuse me. And now you can see another screenshot. This is what happens when the machine came. This is the automatic name that was given to it, and it was running my test job build. And you can see how the test job build was running, and it was running Java and Maven, and it has everything installed because I prepared that image before. And once the build is successful, the machine becomes idle again, and it waits for the retention period that we have specified it, that we have asked it to do. So to conclude that, the continuous delivery on the scale, again, the good news about the scale is it allows us to have integrated and autonomous Jenkins at the same time. And I know these terms are not really, they look like they're mutually exclusive, but they are not. And this is the beauty of CloudBees and Azure, is that we have a certain level of enterprise integration that every enterprise needs that gives us the synergies, but it allows a good amount of autonomy. And as you know, developers and development, they love to be autonomous. They love the feeling of freedom, and that's very important as well for the creative process. So each team and project have their own shared cloud, and within their shared cloud, they have some sort of freedom in what they want to do. They can launch as many agents as they want. They can configure the agents in the way that they figure is okay, but it's also they also have best practices and rules coming from the enterprise. Maybe the image from with the approved build will come from the enterprise, but then they will decide the number of agents that they need to run, something like that. We have updates and plugins coming from CloudBees. From the Operations Center. The Operations Center can control the rolling out updates and plugins. You can roll them on the master level. You can roll them, you can say, I want to start maybe as, if you're familiar with golden topology, you can start in a test environment first, and when the test environment succeeds, then you start moving them into your development environment, and when that succeeds, you move to QA and prod, etc. And it allows us to do a lot of testing before we do rollouts. Also sharing knowledge, CloudBees offers a template plugin, which allows us to create best practices from top to bottom. And it is not always from top to bottom. Sometimes this is a grassroots movement. One team will do something really, really cool, and the ideas float around like pollen, and then the enterprise adapts the idea, and that cool idea becomes now a template, and other people can use it as well. Sharing knowledge is also very important in the way we pass code from dev to QA, to prod, and this is probably more of the DevOps conversation, more outside of the scope of this topic, but the template plugin definitely helps us do that. And then we have the scale of the enterprise, of course, being able to dynamically or on demand add load or remove load, being able to scale vertically by changing the type of machine we are using, or we can scale horizontally by adding new VMs or removing VMs, and our ability to choose completely different types of machines for different builds. If my build is mathematically intensive, then maybe I'll use something with a GPU. If my build is requiring maybe a lot of network traffic, then I will use another machine that has better network configuration. And Microsoft Azure has a large amount of machines and choices that we can choose from. And of course, you can configure each network for every machine as much as you want. And finally, it's all about the economy. If we are an enterprise, it is much cheaper to run as the machines we want when we want them than to actually have to buy machines based on our largest load and run that large load all the time. It is just a straight answer. There is no doubt about that. But the second part of it is that because we're creating multiple clouds, every group, every team, you can have a cloud on the team level, on the group level, you can have a cloud on the project level, and every team subscription Hello? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you again. You're back.
Okay. When did we stop?
You were about to discuss the team subscriptions.
In this slide or previous slides?
I believe you're here in the under economy.
Okay, all right. So sorry. So I was told that the audio was gone. Now we're back. So the team group subscription allows us to have subscriptions that allows us to have responsibility of cost on the team level, on the group level, or on the project level. I mean, this is actually, I like Martin Fowler concept of saying everybody in the enterprise like to think that everything's tidy, but nobody wants to admit to the rough and tumble of the enterprise. And he used to call microservices architecture the rough and tumble architecture. And the rough and tumble of the enterprise is our projects have a budget, but the QA team has a budget, and the operations team has a budget, and the development team has a budget. And our project is borrowing people from all these different teams. And there is always this crisscross of budgets, and there is a horizontal budget and a vertical budget. And Microsoft Azure with subscriptions allows us to control the budgets of our builds very, very easily, and even the budgets of our deployments as well, because you can have a subscription for a project, and then that project, whether they are doing dev or QA or they are doing prod, they are responsible for the cost of the machines. You can have the cost based vertically based on QA. So the QA team will have a subscription that they can lend projects QA machines, and that cost is very easily monitorable. You can monitor it change by the hour. You don't even have to wait for the year. And you can monitor it by the hour, and you can do analytics, and you can understand what is costing you more money, if it's storage, if it is network traffic, if it is just the load of the machines, and you can move forward with that. So now we're coming sort of to the end of our quick bus tour in the wonderland of enterprise continuous integration and deployment with Azure and Jenkins. And in summary, the best things, there's 3 points, 3 things if we want to remember out of that, is that continuous integration and continuous delivery needs confidence and trust between the operations team and the development team. And Microsoft Azure and CloudBees Jenkins gives us all the tools that allow us to give the teams the confidence and trust of each other. We need to scale in an enterprise, and we need to be, we need to be not to fail. We need fault tolerance. We need high scale, and again, we have the right tools in our hands to scale vertically, horizontally, dynamically, or custom responses, and we can share experiences and have a diversity of builds. and it's significant cost control. This is also very important for our enterprise. But as most of you know, the tools are not everything. We all go and buy the right tools. But with the right tools, I think what the best thing about Microsoft and CloudBees Jenkins is that they have a wide net of capable partners, like ourselves, for example, Architect. We have a lot of experience, and we have the team, and we have the capacity to help you in your journey. Because just having the right tools without having the vision and the ability to use them is really counterproductive. So with the tools and with the skills of teams like Architect, what we can do is we can help your development team stay in that fast-moving, innovative mode that they like, that they should be in, that we want them to be in, without bogging them down. And we can help also take that fast innovation movement and standardize it and optimize it without bogging it down, and spread that across the whole organization. And we can do many things, different techniques, different ways. Some of them are technology, some of them are soft skills and management, some of them are like leading from behind and leading from the back, but we can do that into the organization. And then finally, we can cross the barrier from CI to CD, where we can take that and do stabilization and maintenance, use Azure and CloudBees to sort of ease and calm the worries of the operations, and not just calm the worries, but actually respond to their very logical needs. Their needs come from somewhere, and it is very important. Their security rules must be respected and must be applied, and we can do that. And then finally, we can take everything into the governance and guidance, where we can start to have metrics of how are things used in the whole organization, and we can have cost analysis, and we can have usage analysis, and we can understand where we are going with our development and DevOps in the enterprise. So with that, we come to the demo and video part of the presentation. I believe this will be Chen.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ahmed. This is Chen. I'm a solutions architect at CloudBees. And if you could scroll me down to the next slide there, Ahmed. Just wanted to talk us through a very simple demo today. So you'll hear me use the term CJP to refer to CloudBees Jenkins Platform. That is our offering. And as you can see from this slide, I'm providing you a very bite-sized demo today. The product, CJP, is capable of a lot of security features, role-based access control, high availability, elastic capacity, as Ahmed points out, but I want to give you something that you can do yourself in 1 to 2 hours. All right, so what our tool set is going to be, it's going to be some Java code for the game of life, a well-treaded sample application, living inside a Git repository, could be Visual Studio Team Services, could be GitHub, any type of Git repo you all use, or other types of repositories as well. And once there is a change submitted to that repository, what you see in this architecture is CJP does reside within Microsoft Azure, and it's actually going to kick off a build on a remote build agent. Once that build agent has completed the build, we'll actually do a live deployment to a running web app, aka app service. So that's going to be our demo today. Like I said, you can do this in about 1 to 2 hours here. So I want to give you something bite-sized and an easy starting point. No reason these have to be Linux machines, by the way. My experience has been that Azure is great at consuming any type of workload, whether it's Windows, Linux, or anything else that you like. All right, with that, let me go ahead and jump into just a very brief, about 10-minute demo of CJP's capabilities here.
All right, Chen, I'm about to give you the presenter privileges.
You got it. Thank you, Max. I'll give the chat software, the web conference software, just a moment to refresh. You should have in front of you the Jenkins, or actually CloudBees Jenkins Operations Center screen. All All right, so first things first, what are you looking at? If you all have used Jenkins before, this interface will probably be quite familiar to you. Looks like Jenkins. Well, it sort of is, but it's not. CloudBees Jenkins Operations Center is actually a management console for Jenkins. And you can see I have two Jenkins masters right here, Jenkins 0 and Jenkins 1. One of the points that Ahmed made earlier was great. It's that using Azure, you get this concept of shared agents, which can be turned on and turned off, or actually completely deleted when they are not needed. In my very simple demo cluster, I've just got two of these guys, but there's no reason you couldn't have more. All right, so let's just go to one of my Jenkins masters, in this case, Jenkins 0, and have a look at a job I've configured there. I have some mobile jobs and some web apps. Let's go to the web apps directory. Folder, that is. So you'll notice this job, Game of Life Jenkins file, VSTS trigger. That'll be my guinea pig or my demo job for today. What are we deploying to? Well, it's actually, here's the app service. What I've done in this app service is I have used a label here at the lower right to denote what the last Jenkins job that did a deployment was. So we can see here, it is in fact Game of Life Jenkins file, VSTS trigger, build number 9. All right, what I did ahead of time is actually clone this repository to my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a very trivial change to it. In our case, simply add a line to the README. All right, go ahead and save out that change and add it to my Git staging area. I'll kind of cheat and just add everything. And I'm going to commit that change to my local Git repository. So at this point, I've committed the change to my Git repository, but there is a remote repo that I want to push the change to and get that merged to master so it's shared with my team. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. What I've configured on the Git repository is a webhook, which will detect when a merge to master has occurred. And if all goes well, it'll kick off a Jenkins build. And let's just, there we go. So the console right there, bada bing, merge to master should be happening just about now. And we'll want to keep an eye on, again, this job. There we go. Our build queue now sees that a build has started. And where is that build starting, by the way? It's going to select one of these build agents. Okay, you can provide metadata identifying what operating system is supported by the build agent, what tools it has, effectively what purpose it shares within that pool. All right, now we see the build is in progress on one of those build agents, which is simply a separate virtual machine within Azure. Visually, we have the stage view for the pipeline. So this is my entire continuous integration / continuous delivery, or in my case, continuous deployment. I've heard the terms used interchangeably. Right, we're seeing that process play out visually. We can see that the build is happening right now. The deployment to Azure was actually really quick. We want to get a more granular view. We can go to the console output, and what you see is the checkout happens up here. Here's the Maven build output. I'll skip through that. You all know what build output looks like. And here is the deployment to Azure. We pushed our binary to a secure FTP site and deployed it to this particular URL. So that pipeline has now finished. And let's refresh the running web app. You can see that the build 9 became a build 10. The last thing I want to cover here is what actually happened when that pipeline executed. If we look at the configuration, some of you who are used to Jenkins may be used to freestyle jobs. This is a pipeline job. It's meant to model very complex CI/CD workflows in a single set of versionable code. It's also known as pipeline as code. Yeah. The configuration goes like this. What's the definition of my pipeline? Well, it actually lives in the SCM. What's my SCM? That's a Git repository. Here's where it lives. There's my credentials for accessing the Git repo. That's the branch I'm working with. All pretty standard stuff. Now, when you look at the actual script path, where does it live? It's Jenkins file. Interesting, right? Doesn't have a lot of meaning if you come from outside the Jenkins world. But here's how these stages that you saw actually map to the Jenkins file. Jenkins file is a marker file. If any of you use Docker out there, you're probably familiar with the concept of a Docker file. Jenkins file, it's the same thing. It lives in the root of a repository, has a special name that Jenkins recognizes when it checks out this repository, and it'll execute the commands within it. Here we have a simple piece of Groovy code, and if we look at our stages, they represent those stages we saw within the jobs stage view. Checkout, there we go. All that does is get some code from the Git repo. Build, well, hey, that's just an easy Maven clean package command right there, right? That took the longest in my test setup. Deployment to Azure, well, there's my secure FTP push using some deployment user credentials for my Azure App Service. Finally, we do a quick smoke test to verify the deployment. And you can see all of those stages play out visually. So the whole idea is really Jenkins file gives you the ability to edit your CI/CD pipeline as code in the text editor or IDE of your choice. As Ahmed showed earlier, your CI/CD pipeline can be a living, breathing thing. It may change quite a bit over time. And here you have it as a piece of code that you can reference specific versions of, share with your team, put up for pull requests, code reviews, so on and so forth. And that's really all I had for you today. This is truly the tip of the iceberg. The only last thing I want to leave you with is if any of this was of interest to you and you want to give it a go, simply go to your Azure portal, click on the virtual machines link, and click add first, skip the step, and look for CloudBees. Pick the one that says CloudBees Jenkins Platform. This is the one I recommend. It will self-license and simply bill as you go along. You can get pricing details once you click on the virtual machine. If you do have an existing CloudBees license, you can also bring your own license and use that with the Azure deployment of CJP. Okay, but make sure you pick one that says CloudBees Jenkins Platform. So that's all I had for you today. I want to thank you for sitting through my demo. Let me hand the presentation back to Ahmed to take us home here.
All right, I'm going to give you presenter privileges, Ahmed. I would like to get one question answered before we run out of time. Do you have anything you would like to say first, Ahmed?
No, thanks everybody. Thank you for coming today, and I hope we had a good view of Jenkins, CloudBees, and Azure. Please follow us on Twitter. You can follow Architect, or you can follow me personally and contact us for your opportunities with your organization. And please, let's have some questions.
All right, perfect. We are very close to the end of the hour. There's one that I would like to get answered. Andy also saw it. So Andy, I don't know if you would like to read it out for us, but
Sure. Ahmed, I believe this question is directed towards Architect. The question was, does Architect make use of the ARM templates in Jenkins and CloudBees Jenkins pipelines to build a new target environment as part of the deployment?
We haven't done it ourselves in our deployments, but I'm not sure about, so I can't really answer that question right now.
Okay. And to address the ARM templates, Cheng kind of made the point to cover those right at the end of his demo too. Those, if you're referring to the ARM templates that are available there in Azure, you can see that we did have the two out there for a pay-as-you-go and also a BYOL model. So if you have more questions about this, as I mentioned, you can reach out to Ahmed. You can certainly reach out to us too at CloudBees to go if you would like greater detail around that. We did have a couple other questions here too. I believe, I'm hoping that you were able to see the answers that we posted. One of the questions was how do containers, specifically Docker, fit into the various schemes? As this organization was looking at containers, there are various ways that containers are applied with CloudBees Jenkins, whether it's running containerized applications or running CloudBees Jenkins itself as a Docker container. I'm going to reshare a link that has various descriptions of the way that we integrate with Docker containers. There are actually 6 existing plugins for CloudBees Jenkins with Docker containers too. So depending upon the use case that you're interested in, there's a lot of very, very good content out on this page. I'm going to post it in the question window. So, so you guys have it available to you. And if you don't see that or don't get that for whatever reason, you can certainly reach out to either Architect or CloudBees, and we will get you all of that information.
Yeah.
And then there was one more question regarding the recording of this. Yes, there will be correspondence set out regarding the recording of this webinar, so you guys can share it on demand with your teams. And those are all the questions that I saw come in via the window.
All right, we have 2 minutes till the top of the hour. Let's give it about 15 seconds to see if any more come in. And then if not, we'll let all the rest of you get on with your day, and we'll get to reporting to you as soon as possible. All right, we should be all set. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us for this presentation. There's a lot of good information today. I hope you all learned a lot. Thank you, Ahmed and Chen, and of course, Architect, for doing this with us. And we will talk to you all soon.